Hi, and welcome to Rural Teen Vaping, Chew, and Smoking Prevention. My name is Jeff Jordan, President and Executive Creator at Rescue Agency, the behavior change marketing agency. And we've been working on youth tobacco prevention for nearly 20 years with a specific focus on rural teen tobacco prevention for nearly 10 years. Our agency focuses exclusively on positive social change topics within public health, such as tobacco control, substance use, obesity prevention, and others. We have over 160 staff all across the country that work day and night dedicated exclusively to positive social change on issues such as this. Now today, we're going to talk about rural teen tobacco prevention for one really important reason, and that is that rural teens are disproportionately more likely to use tobacco products. Now, this disproportionate use has been well known for a long time, and there's many reasons for it. For example, a more pro-tobacco policy environment that has been stubborn to change over the past couple decades. Also, dedicated tobacco industry marketing. And we know that this disproportionate use of tobacco has led to greater health consequences from tobacco use, such as lung cancer. So it's something really important that we need to tackle, but that public health has had trouble tackling in the past. So what do we do about this? Well, since we know that the policy environment is going to continue to be stubborn over time, and we should continue to work on it, but it will take time to get those wins, we need to look at, well, what is it about rural life that makes tobacco use more normative? And is there a way that we can change those norms, break the association between rural culture and tobacco use itself so that the next generation of teens growing up in rural areas don't become addicted to tobacco products? Well, we can. But the first thing we've got to do is we've got to ask, who are rural teens? And how can we better understand who they are so that we can appeal to them the way that seems like tobacco control hasn't been able to in the past. A really helpful tool to understand who teens are and kind of their culture is called peer crowds. Now, we've been using the peer crowd model for over a decade now, and if you've watched me speak before, you maybe have heard me talk about it. Peer crowds are macro-level subcultures with shared beliefs, values, norms, and behaviors that transcend geography and race ethnicity. Adolescents and their immediate peer group belong to a larger peer crowds that share significant cultural similarities across geographic areas. Now, peer crowds help young people navigate social environments and provide a reference for behavioral norms such as health behaviors. So it's important to understand when we talk about rural teens, who are we talking about from a cultural perspective? What peer crowds do they belong to? And can that give us a clue into how we can appeal to them more effectively with our tobacco control messages? When we've done our peer crowd research across the country, and we've done it in over 25 different states, we found that there's 5 common peer crowds that we pretty much always find. There's mainstream teens, popular teens, hip hop, country, and alternative teens. Now, we don't have time to go into all of them, but I encourage you to watch some of our other videos that talk about our full peer crowd model. But what's important is that there's a difference when we go into rural communities. When we go into rural communities, which we've done across the country, we find that there's predominantly 3 peer crowds that we tend to find: mainstream, popular, and country teens. And so when we talk about rural teens, we're not talking about a monolith. We're talking about a diverse group of teens. And when we've looked at tobacco use in rural areas, what we found is that it's pretty much concentrated with one of those groups, and that is country teens. Mainstream and popular teens have disproportionately lower tobacco use rates, whether they are in rural areas, suburban areas, or urban areas. But country teens, which we do find everywhere but are more concentrated in rural areas, are the reason why we see disproportionate tobacco use in rural areas. So let's look at the data. The way that we measure peer crowds is through something that we call the I-Base survey. And we're lucky enough to have the I-Base survey on multiple state-level representative studies, such as the Youth Tobacco Survey and Youth with the YRBS survey in multiple states. Now, this data is from one of those states, from South Carolina. And what we see here is when we look at any tobacco use in the past 30 days, country teens were the second highest most likely to have used tobacco. Nearly 35% of them had used a tobacco product in the past 30 days. The only group that was higher was alternative, which is a much smaller group than country teens. When we look at cigarette smoking, country teens are about third. When we look at e-cigarettes, they're usually about second. And when we look at smokeless tobacco use, they tend to be first. And finally, little cigars and cigarillos, they are usually second or third. So what does this mean? Is that country teens are at disproportionate use. They tend to be around second most likely to use tobacco products, unless you're looking at chew, and then they're pretty much always first. So what can we learn about who country teens are that can help us break this disparity and reduce tobacco use specifically amongst this group? Well, the nice thing about peer crowds is that it's not just a title that we put to it, it's actually deep-seated values. And these values can be a window into who these teens are and what appeals to them. So in these states, we have done additional work, and this work I'm going to show you is from the state of Virginia. And what we found there is that there's specific values that are associated with each peer crowd. Now, I'm not going to talk about all 5 of them, but when we look at specifically the values that country teens are disproportionately more likely to agree with, I think it's more important to know and defend my rights as American. Having adventures outside, like hunting or fishing, is an important part of who I am. They agree with being outdoorsy, proud to be American, and value their personal rights. They agree that protecting my personal liberties and freedoms is something they care about. Quote, I prefer what some people might call a simple way of life. They agree with, quote, is proud to be American, is outdoorsy, and works hard and gets dirty. And finally, they enjoy a country way of life. So these kind of are getting at a similar thing. They're different phrases that we've used in studies to try and discern which values are more associated with which crowd. Now, these aren't all their values, right? There are many values that teens share across the board. But what we're most interested in, well, what are the values that make country teens different from the other peer crowds? And this is the nature of those findings. So we know that country teens are different. And what we found over the years is that these differences have led to them not really identifying with the common tobacco prevention campaigns that are out there. The typical tobacco prevention campaign tends to try and target all teens at once. And what that means is that they usually appeal to kind of the more mainstream popular types of teens, what we would call kind of like the MTV teenager. And well, country teens are definitely not the MTV teenager. And so when they see those tobacco prevention campaigns, they don't really see themselves in them, and they don't really think that they are for them. And so they tend to ignore them or just disregard them. Country teens see themselves differently. But as we've done research testing all sorts of different tobacco campaigns that are out there with country teens, we've noticed that it's even deeper than that. Country teens like to consume a certain kind of information. They prefer a video where someone is talking to them, where they can see who is this information coming from, which is very different from other teens. Other teens are fine with a voiceover and music and rapid cuts. Country teens are not. They think that that kind of video is actually trying to pull a fast one on them, trying to trick them into believing something that they don't want to believe. They want a slow and steady speaker. They want someone that they can trust and that they know is like them. And that's why the vast majority of tobacco prevention programs that have been out there that have tried to reach all teens at once have not been able to break this disparity within country teens because they simply don't trust it and they don't associate with it. So 10 years ago, when we first discovered this information, we said, we need a campaign that's exclusively designed for country teens. And that's where Down and Dirty came from. Down and Dirty is our ready-made tobacco prevention campaign designed exclusively for country teens. It is an evidence-based campaign to fight rural teen vaping and tobacco use in your community. So what does ready-made mean? Well, ready-made means that it's pre-existing, but it's continuing to grow. So there's constantly new content that's being developed. It's built on multi-state formative research. I think we've done Down and Dirty research now in over a dozen states. It delivers evidence-based messaging that we've heard from teens over and over again that works for them, that they identify with, and that makes them think differently about tobacco use. It offers pre-made, pre-tested ads, saving you the hassle of having to create a campaign from scratch and the cost. And all of it's field tested. All of it has already been run with country teens. They've already reacted to it. Tweaks have already been made, and you're getting a refined, effective product. In fact, because of all of this is already made and ready to go, these ready-made campaigns are actually ready to launch within less than a month of contracting. And you don't have to pay to make it. You just pay a small licensing fee that is a fraction of the cost of what it usually takes to make a campaign from scratch. Now, the way that Down and Dirty works is that it uses our social branding strategy to break the association between tobacco use and country lifestyles. Social branding is a behavior change marketing strategy that utilizes peer crowd targeted social brands to associate healthy behaviors with peer crowd values. So let's break that down a little bit. It means that a brand is created specifically for one peer crowd, in this case, country teens, And it associates the values of those teens, so things we just talked about, like their value of independence, of simple way of life, of patriotism, of all those things. It associates those things with the behavior that we want them to engage in, which is living tobacco-free. By exclusively focusing on this audience and building a brand exclusively for them, we're able to build brand equity, build trust between us and the audience. And once that brand has that trust, it's able to deliver messages that they are more likely to listen to consider, and to believe. And more importantly, in this age where there's so much media all over the place, so many different things you could be listening to, this allows teens to know, hey, that's for me, right? Because if you're a country teen and you're seeing all this stuff, you're probably not even listening to it unless there's some clue that tells you this might be for you. And that's what the Down and Dirty brand, the look, the style does. It captures their attention, and then it delivers a message that's deliberately designed to pull on their values so that they reconsider their behavior. Now, this entire idea about social branding actually came from observing how it was that the tobacco industry was able to convince so many different people to begin using tobacco when we know how harmful it is. And the country culture is no exception. Tobacco use brands such as Marlboro and Copenhagen and others have been targeting rural teens, rural culture for decades. In fact, their use of rodeos as a vehicle to deliver their message has been a case study within marketing, within commercial marketing, for a long time. And their success is based on creating a brand that their audience can identify with, right? The macho Marlboro man, the tough grizzly chew user or Copenhagen user. These are brands designed specifically for the identities, values, and lifestyles of country people. And so what we wanted to do when we first kind of worked on social branding was we wanted to take this successful model and turn it on its head, use it to counter market against the tobacco industry, and break the association between country and tobacco use that they have spent decades working on. How does social branding work? Well, every teen has kind of their own identity. And so in this case, we're focused on country teens' identity, but this would work with any teens, as we've done with some of our other programs. And they have their current role models, the people they look up to, the norms, where they're kind of getting their normative information. The brand becomes one of those. So we establish a social brand to become essentially a role model, to become something that they can identify with. Then we introduce new behaviors that challenge their current behaviors. So now they have a new voice within their culture that's challenging the behavior that we want them to perform. And then we reinforce that behavior with stronger reinforcements. When possible, we try and be out there at events, at places where they're present. We try and reinforce their behavior through social media by making those who are tobacco-free within the culture louder. A lot of times, you can see the behavior of tobacco use, but you can't see the behavior of being anti-tobacco. So we raise the volume on those who are already within the culture who are anti-tobacco, which creates the impression of change happening. And that change, that impression of change, actually motivates them to change their behavior because they start to feel like, well, I need to keep up with my changing culture. So just like a new clothing brand or style or a new music or something that teens latch onto, social branding is designed to make living tobacco-free feel like a new trend that they have to latch onto in order to stay relevant within their own culture. Now, Down and Dirty is a national movement. It has been implemented so far in over a dozen different states. And this has allowed us to gather so much data on that field implementation and really refine every single message that Down and Dirty includes, every single delivery method that we use, and exactly how we deliver those messages. Each state and each round of focus groups, each creative implementation, they all are kind of this cycle that just of improvement, of continuous improvement, that ensures that the next person who uses that message package, that licenses that ready-made product, gets an even better and an even stronger product. So talking about those products, let's take a look at them. Down and Dirty has a growing library of content that we call message packages. A message package contains everything needed to run a modern youth campaign. A 30-second TV or web commercial that can be used on either, 15-second and often 6-second what we call takedowns of those commercials for those shorter placement opportunities, at least 20, often more social media posts and images, at least 10 and often more digital media ads, a comprehensive national website that folks can use, implementation strategies and tactics, and often even interactive elements that folks can use online to engage with the message. So let me show you a couple of these message packages so you can get a sense of what they include, and then also see what teens have to say about them. Now, the way that we test our message packages before they go out into the field is both qualitatively and quantitatively. Now, quantitatively, what we use is something called the Perceived Effectiveness Index. And this is something used by the CDC and the FDA, and what it is 6 questions that ask teens how effective they believe an ad is. And it's been associated with future success in campaigns with both teens and adults. It asks them about, is this ad worth remembering? Did it grab their attention? Powerful, meaningful, convincing, and informative? And this gets averaged out into a score between 1 and 5. Anything above a 3.0 is considered likely to be effective. And the higher it goes, the more likely and more impactful that ad is likely to be. So let's take a look at that first Down and Dirty commercial. This one is called Legacy.
Dad handed down a lot to me. This truck, my work ethic, my shot, but our time was cut short when I lost him to mouth cancer caused by dipping. People say I remind them of him. I can see why, but when it comes to dip, we're not the same, because I plan to be around a lot longer than he was. And you know, I think he'd be good with that. My life, my legacy will be tobacco-free.
So in our testing, Legacy received a perceived effectiveness score of 3.8, which means it's highly likely to be very effective. So let's hear from teens directly about why they thought this ad was so effective. One teen in our focus group said, "My dad is also very country and dips, so I think it's something relatable to me and a lot of my peers in my area." Another teen said, "Country's always stereotyped as tobacco being part of the culture, and to show the next generation trying to change, that was really nice." Another teen said, "The strong motivation and how relatable it is. My father is a smoker and he handed me down everything but his addictions. He tells me I know better than him." Another teen said, "It was a good message and I liked how it was low-key and unintimidating." This is actually really important in terms of the production style that country teens identify with. And finally, the last teen said, "I like how it seems just like my lifestyle, so it relates to me. Now I don't want to use tobacco." So what these teens are really picking up on is a lot of the cultural cues that are within the ad. It shows them this is different than what they normally see. A lot of country teens feel ignored and forgotten. And so when they finally see something that's designed exclusively for them, they get really excited and they really listen up to what it has to say. Let's take a look at a different commercial to get some more feedback.
There's nothing better than growing up in a small town.
Everybody knows everybody. If I'm broke down or something like that, they're always there to help me.
I like living in the sticks. People here usually take care of each other and care about each other.
So when I heard that 1,300 Americans die each day because of tobacco, I couldn't help but think about my hometown. In fact, that's more than the population of 1/3 of Virginia's towns. I don't want to see anyone from my town killed off by tobacco. That's why I choose to live tobacco-free.
So Hometown received a perceived effectiveness score of 3.7. Again, highly likely to be effective. And what teens had to say about this one was that if it's to where I live and isn't just a video thrown into a survey for everyone, right? Again, picking up on those cues that this is for them, not for anyone else. I can relate to this because I live in a small town as well, picking up on that as well. And here's what another teen said. "I think this was a wake-up call for me. Being from Western Pennsylvania, this really stood out to me, hits me deep. And I may not be from the sticks, but I have a lot of close friends and family who are, and who smoke, and seeing that, it really touched me personally." So again, we're hearing what we hear constantly in these focus groups with rural teens is that they're so surprised to see something that is designed specifically for them that they just open up and listen to what it has to say and start to reconsider their behaviors. As you can see, those past two ads were focused on chew and then more broadly on the impact of tobacco. But as vaping has started to infiltrate rural communities just as it has urban communities, we also wanted to make vaping prevention a part of Down and Dirty. But to do that, we had to do it in a way that is specifically designed for country teens. So let's take a look at Teardown.
I like to take things apart, so I wanted to get to the bottom of everybody saying that these are just water vapor. Here's what's actually in here. So when the coil system heats up, a vape cloud is made that may contain up to 31 chemicals, like nickel, lead, and even benzene, the stuff that comes out of your exhaust pipe. And some of those chemicals can damage your lungs. Now, There are all different types of e-cigs and vapes out there, but no matter what type you're using, the aerosol you're breathing isn't harmless.
Now, Teardown I really like because it really pulls in everything that's unique about country teens, right? You can see that the young man there was actually breaking down a vape and investigating it himself. And this is core to country lifestyle. Country teens, they fix things, they break things apart, they reassemble them. It's just part of their nature to understand themselves how stuff works. And so it actually increased the trust of the commercial significantly to show someone breaking a vape apart and examining it themselves. It wasn't some third party, scientist or something out there that was telling you should do this or you should do that. No, it was a guy who figured it out on his own. And that was something that's really, really powerful to them. In fact, Teardown also has a perceived effectiveness score of 3.8. And here's what those teens had to say about it. I liked how they took it apart and everything and showed what was going on and talked about what kind of chemicals are inside of it. I could actually see it on TV. It's just very hands-on, I guess. I don't know why, but that one really caught my attention. It talks about the chemicals and he physically takes it apart and he talks about the actions of what's happening inside vapes. Another teen said, I also have seen people like him in different settings and he's someone that I would know. I would definitely be able to relate because I think I know people like him and he was young. And another teen said, we're from Kentucky. I feel like that markets a lot to people, like in the South, because a lot of the boys here love to work on cars and love to take things apart. So you notice how many of the cultural cues they just latch onto, right? Who the guy is, what he talks like, what he acts like, what he's interested in. He's interested in breaking stuff apart just like they are. These teens are so used to kind of trying to figure out who is part of their culture and who is not, that they really pay attention to this stuff and really listen when they know it's something for them. In addition to these commercials, each of these ready-made message packages also include interactive elements, such as this game where teens can kind of drag different dip cans into the trash and use that in order to possibly win some prizes depending on the local campaign. And it connects to how much money they're spending on vapes and chew and things like that. All of this is a part of the message packages that states can license, and they can license them in their own order. They can kind of pick and choose which ones they want, which ones they don't want, which really makes the campaign really flexible and really customizable to each of the local areas where it's being implemented. Each of the message packages includes a number of different components that are designed for everything that a modern campaign needs: digital media, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, some of these country teens are still on Facebook. And of course, TV and radio, if that's a part of your campaign. And the national website is either usable, shareable as a national site, or a state can kind of have their own version of it that they customize, etc. The point is, everything that you need is already made, already included, and you only have to pay a fraction of the price of what it would cost to make it from scratch. And more importantly, it's designed specifically and based specifically on country teen culture, their values, their identity, who they are. This campaign's been around for a while, so we've actually been lucky enough to be able to evaluate it in multiple states. And I'm gonna share the evaluation real quick from one state. This is specifically from the evaluation in Virginia. And this evaluation, already published a couple years ago in Health Education and Behavior, looked at the campaign from 2014 through 2016, specifically focusing on its impact with chew tobacco use. Back then, we weren't quite talking about vapes yet, so it was focused more on chew. It looked at over 1,200 teens that were completing an online survey and participating because they lived in these rural areas. And what we found was that compared to Wave 1, country teens who reported to us that they had engaged with the Down and Dirty campaign demonstrated greater odds of reporting strong attitudes against chew at Wave 2 and at Wave 3. We saw those attitudes continue to strengthen. And then that connected to actual chew use. So compared to Wave 1, we saw that country teens who engaged with Down and Dirty had significantly lower odds of having used chew tobacco products within the past 30 days at both Wave 2 and at Wave 3. So that means we were seeing an impact a year later and seeing an even bigger impact another year later. You can see there the odds at Wave 3 of 0.24, a significant, huge reduction in their odds of having chewed in the past 30 days. Down and Dirty is evidence-based, evaluated, proven to work, and designed specifically to reach country teens. So if you have country teens in your state and your community, and you want to finally break this disparity from tobacco use, then I encourage you to join this community of collaboration of all these states who have or are currently implementing Down and Dirty to finally reduce tobacco use amongst this population that so much needs our help. So thank you very much for watching. If you wanted to learn more about some of the topics I talked about, such as peer crowds, vaping, etc., go to our YouTube channel, check out some of our other videos. We've got videos covering all of those topics. And if you are ready to bring Down and Dirty to your hometown, please be sure to reach out and contact us.